Hello and welcome back to Raised by Giants, where we talk all things spirituality. I'm Ryder Lee. Tonight, we have very special guest, author, documentary filmmaker, hypnotherapist Mary Rodwell. But before I introduce her, Raised by Giants is on Rokfin. Go over there, set up a Rokfin account. I release one premium video a week over there, and it is far less than a YouTube premium account. And you'll get all of my premium content as well as my regular content. And when you sign up for a Rokfin premium account, you get my content and all of the other creators' content on Rokfin. Some amazing content creators over there. Check the link in the description to sign up for the video streaming platform Rokfin. Also, if you'd like to make a donation to help the channel grow and produce more content, you can donate on PayPal or buy me a coffee to help support my work. It is 100% completely optional, but is unfortunately the only alternative other than monetizing. And we know what happens to channels like this when monetization gets involved. And I want to keep this channel. I like being here with you guys. So if you can donate it, very much appreciated. No donation is too small. And thanks to everyone that's donated so far. I appreciate all of you so much for your very kind and generous donations. Check the link in the description for donation options. Thank you. So without further ado, introducing tonight's guest, Mary Rodwell. Mary is recognized internationally as one of Australia's leading researchers and writers in the UFO and contact phenomenon areas. Mary is the author of the highly acclaimed book, Awakening: How Extraterrestrial Contact Can Transform Your Life, and the producer of EBE award-winning documentaries. Mary is the founder and principal of the Australian Close Encounter Resource Network, ACERN, which was established in 1997 to provide professional counseling, support, hypnotherapy, and information to individuals and their families with anomalous paranormal abduction and contact experiences. Mary is also the director and chair of the experiencer support programs of Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research in Extraterrestrial Encounters and the advisory committee member of Exopolitics. Mary also researched more than 3,000 cases and suggests extraterrestrial encounters are a global phenomenon. And this is evident in the new humans referred to as star children. Hello, Mary, and welcome to the show. It's amazing to have you on. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you, Ryan. It's lovely to meet you.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation and kind of where I just wanted to really jump into it and just kind of get it going here. And I wanted to start it off with is you've done a lot of research and worked with over 3,000 cases of abductees and contactees, which is a lot of cases, right? And which what was the case that really made you sit back and say, huh, there's really something to this. This might indeed have something to do with extraterrestrial, and there might be more that's going on here than meets the eye.
Oh, Ryder, I think that the very first case that I had was so convincing. And the gentleman that I got, I mean, he's become a good friend now, but he was very middle-aged man, very articulate, had heard that I was open-minded. And basically he came to see me because he didn't know where else to go. He said, look, there's no support groups for this. For this, they just think you're crazy. He woke up with marks on his body, shaved areas. His partner was having experiences, the children were. People wouldn't come to the house, or his relatives wouldn't come to the house because they thought it was demons. So you've not got one person there, you've got a whole family involved, and that immediately changes the way that you would look at it anyway. So for me, it was primarily my very first case, although I had done a little bit of reading prior to that. Fortunately, I'd come across Dr. John Mack's book, the former Harvard professor of psychiatry who'd written the book Abduction: Human Encounters with Aliens. And he'd come from being a skeptic, doing all the psychological testing, and really in the end absolutely believed those that he'd researched. And so you've got someone pretty credible saying, I believe this is real, who started the center to explore this professionally. And also I read Whitley Strieber's book Communion, which is classic, the first major one to really stand out for me. So I got that in the background. But actually meeting someone, I thought it was very rare, though. That was probably my biggest mistake thinking it was rare, because of course now I know it isn't, and it's everywhere. But at the time, more than anything, I didn't ever feel I could disbelieve Ellis, because he was just so darn convincing, and so was his family. So really, right from the word go, it was going to be possible, although I needed to find out more and more. And of course, over the years, I mean, it became absolutely obvious that something major was going on this planet, and the governments were not letting you know.
Which is really interesting to me because it seems like the abduction phenomenon and the contact experiences isn't necessarily physical contact. It's more of it's more done in the astral state or the dream state. Is that something that you have found too? Or I guess my question is have you spoken with anyone or worked with any of the 3,000 people that you've worked with? Have they ever experienced an actual physical entity in their home, or is this done on a spiritual and consciousness level in the dream state or in the astral state?
It's a good question, and it's both. What we discovered with the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation, I'm a co-founder of that. We did the surveys with 4,200 people globally, conscious recall, 600 questions. And one of the fascinating facts that came out from that was 75% of their encounters were out of body. But you still got 25% that were physical. So, you know, that in itself, I think, is pretty compelling. And people will have both. Sometimes they'll wake up with marks on their body, for example, the pajamas under the bed or in the cupboard, or different pajamas on, or find themselves outside with the doors locked, and this kind of thing, which makes it absolutely physical. And there's many cases of that. But there's also many that in my survey, you know, that I send out, in the dream state, they'll say, oh, I had a dream where I was on a UFO, never knew whether it was real or not. And the question I ask them is, when was that dream? And they may say 5 years ago. And I'm saying, and you still remember it? I can pretty well tell you that that was the reality. So absolutely both states. And sometimes what I've found on board craft, if they're working on the physical body, they'll move the consciousness somewhere else and actually work on maybe the brain itself, and then the consciousness will be, if you like, reattached to its physical body, or put back into its physical body.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I've been studying this a little bit, and I personally think that a lot of the phenomenon is done by our military and clandestine organizations and the government. So, what in your research has led you to believe that these are actual extraterrestrial encounters? What, I know this is a broad question, but what is it that they want with humans? Is it an upgrading? Are they trying to change us? Are they trying to change our consciousness to develop us more? Like, why the experimentation and the taking of our DNA, and in some cases a semen from men and eggs from women, hair follicles, and all of this stuff? What is the reason behind that?
Well, there's a couple of questions in that, really. So let's look at the pseudo abductions for a start. The MyLab, which is the military or sections of the military that are abducting people, doing pseudo abductions, making them think it's extraterrestrial in many cases, terrorizing them, drugging them, and what have you, and interrogating them. The program for that is primarily to find out if they what happens on board craft, what they're learning on board craft, what they're as much information on the beings as possible that the military are trying to find out. And they will actually re-traumatize them. And they're usually the most traumatized that I come across, are the ones that have had MyLab. Now, the real ones, let me give you an example of what the survey said. Now, I wrote Awakening, How Extraterrestrial Contact Can Transform Your Life. I found that with the ones that were genuine encounters, and I mean, I've talked about the fact that 3,500 people, families and children that I've worked with, the surveys that Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation did on the outcomes, and there are some amazing outcomes. And that is the real truth of the agenda, when 85% of that 4,200 said they had a psycho-spiritual transformation. Now, that in itself gives you a pretty good idea of what is the outcome. The outcome is they often change their diet, they become more holistic, many of them become healers, many of them want to live a more eco-friendly lifestyle. They become completely disinterested in living in a consumer society. Many of them want to connect with the planet. So you've got a complete change in philosophy and motivation after their experiences. And most of it is to be about caring for the planet, being a better human being. Now, if you've got a dark agenda from these beings, that is not the outcome you expect for a start, you know, because why would they bother to upgrade consciousness, wake people up, and enhance their awareness, their multidimensional abilities? Because that's the bit that I help a lot with, is once they've had contact, they start to see spirit beings and many other beings in, you know, around them, energy fields. They'll start to see orbs of light. They'll start to become more empathic, for example. All these abilities seem to be enhanced after they have their contact experiences. So what it seems that many of the species, and look, I can't say that all of them are benevolent because I don't know that. All I know is with all the surveys we've done, ultimately the majority find it has completely transformed their life and their awareness. And that in itself, I think, is very profound.
It almost sounds similar to a near-death experience, right? Because when people have a near-death experience, they tend to come back different, right? And they want to change things about their life. And it would kind of make sense if, like what you were talking about earlier, if they take the consciousness out of this physical avatar that we were in to do things to our physical body, then that would, whether you knew it or not, that would technically be a sort of out of body experience or some sort of near death experience. Have you connected any near death experiencers to this phenomenon at all?
Ryder, you're obviously very well informed, and absolutely. What I discovered was that those that had near-death experiences then often were communicating with spirits or ETs or interdimensionals or whatever. Those that have had shamanic experiences, there's parallels with that. Those that start opening up spiritually, whether they're doing healing practices or whatever, start to open up and see more of the dimensions and more of the different types of beings, from angelic beings right through to interdimensionals, extra dimensionals, transdimensionals, some from our visitors from our future. So you've got all these ways that when we expand our consciousness, then we also expand our interactions with all these different intelligences. And I've often said that the UFO contact experience is like a modern day shamanic wake-up call, because after it, you know, like the shaman has to transcend their human fears to operate in a multidimensional reality. What happens after the encounter experience? Exactly the same thing. They have to transcend their human fears and then embrace a multidimensional awareness. So it's exactly the same. The parallels are exactly the same. So channeling, all these abilities, clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, all of these things get expanded once you have this experience. But it can happen through a near-death experience. It can happen through out-of-body experience. It can happen if you've learned remote viewing. It can happen with anything that expands your consciousness. You start to see more of, if you like, the hologram and who's in there. And it's all in the same bucket, the same space, if you like, or multidimensional space.
Yeah, when you talk about like the abduction phenomenon, and then you talk about the contactees, I feel like those are two separate things, right? The abduction would be something that's against your will, and then the contact would be more of a free will. So I guess my question would be, why, if they are intending to upgrade the consciousness or help us in any kind of way in this physical reality that we are in, why would they feel the need to take us against our will? Like, why couldn't they just come to us like some other contactees that they come to? Why the abduction? Maybe it's not so much that they look at it as an abduction. We've just planted
Yeah.
that name on the phenomenon, you know what I mean? And we've to categorize it into our, our physical 3D reality. Maybe it's not so much as an abduction as what we've, put that label on it as.
Well, that's a good question. And there's multiple ways of understanding that. Certainly, the ones that have happened with the military are abductions, and they're absolutely against somebody's will. There are those that come to me initially saying they've been abducted. When we've explored with them, and they've got more of an understanding, they may change their mind. For example, somebody may say, I've been taken X number of times and absolutely feeling it's been against their will. What people don't realize is that when you take them into an altered state, into a trance state, and they revisit that particular experience, there's questions that I ask to find out whether in fact it was something that was against their will, absolutely, or whether there's another level to that. And what I'm calling about is the subconscious, superconscious, higher self that also sees it from that perspective or not. And I will ask the question, have you on any level consented to this? For a great number, they'll say, yes, but before I came here. So they may not have a conscious recall of that, but when they're taken to that other level of awareness, they will see there's been some kind of contract because there's been a trade. And many of them have felt that some of their abilities, part of the reason they've got their abilities is because of the trade of allowing a sperm collection or a genetic material or eggs taken as part of a program of seeding and being part of a bigger program. I remember an 8-year-old telling me that not only was she taken on craft to enhance her abilities, her learning to levitate, use a third eye, they showed me genetic engineering, she said, where they told me they would mix species and seed other planets. So they're in a big program of seeding the cosmos with different life forms. And that's how she explained it to me. So we're involved in a far bigger program than many of us actually initially understand. But there is a big agenda there. That's not to say that everyone has consented. I remember one gentleman, I said to him, have you on any level consented? I think it was a gentleman or a lady. And she said to me, well, yes, no. And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, well, I did. On my ET self agreed. She said, but my human self didn't realize it was going to be so hard. And in other words, she was caught between two aspects of herself, the hybrid consciousness of the ET, which she related to, which was fine with it. But the other part of her human self said, it wasn't so much fun. So what I'm trying to do is help the person connect the dots to make sense to them. It's not for me to tell them what to believe. It's for me to open the door for them to explore and understand for themselves how they want to interpret their experiences and integrate them. So, that's the job.
Yeah, it makes sense that you could agree to it on a higher level, like from your higher self or something, and then not be aware of it, and then be agreed to like that. Because I've been told that by a healer that I really trust and a channeler that I really trust that my higher self agreed to some form of abduction, and that I've been abducted for a really long time. But and I was like, oh, I didn't agree to that. What do you mean? There wasn't a pencil and a piece of paper for me to write that out. And he was like, no, it was your higher self. So if you want to get rid of it, you have to communicate with your higher self in order to, nullify that contract. But what does the past lives? Does the past life have anything to do with being contacted by ETs? What's the connection there?
Absolutely. I mean, I'll tell you a little story first, just prior to, I'm actually going to be doing a presentation that's tying in past lives to present lives of people that have had something that happened in a past life that is relevant to their ET experiences now. But to give you an example of when that first came to my understanding, was I was doing a past life regression with a young lady who just wanted to explore a past life. She was curious. She found herself as in medieval times as a healer. And I sort of said to her, so you help the village, you know, the herbs for various illnesses and what have you. She said, oh, yes. So I said to her, so who taught you? I thought, you know, she'd have some kind of older person that would have taught her. She said, oh, no, she said, I learned all my understanding in the woods. So I said, okay, so when you're in the woods, how do you know what herbs are for what? She said, well, there's this little guy, this little gray guy that comes to me and shows me what herbs I need for healing and what have you. So she was talking about a gray. Now that blew her away as well as me, because, you know, that's the last thing I expected her to come out with. So they've been visiting, obviously, all through history. And we know that the Australian Indigenous people will talk about the Wandjina, who show them where to find food and water and all these kinds of things, the mantis beings and what have you. So we know the Indigenous tribes know that they've been visiting all the way through. But what's interesting on two levels about past lives, many the children that I talk to now, as well as adults, will talk about coming from another galaxy, planet, a dimension, or whatever. One recently was a 10-year-old boy that said this is his first Earth incarnation. He comes from a planet where he was a blue being. He said, I've come as a center seed to connect to the planet. He said, I'm going to help with pollution. So he had very much related to his past life, coming in as a human being this time. I've met many children that have said they're from a crystal planet, a water planet. And one young lady recently I spoke to, she's all of 9, a gorgeous little lass, and she called herself a hybrid. And I said, why do you call yourself a hybrid? She said, well, I come from a water planet, and part of that being is still with me. I'm still part of that being that was on the water planet, as well as human. So she'd even done a drawing of the being that she was on the water planet, and talked about how she interacted there and what have you. So there are a lot of children that have no problem with connecting a past life to why they've come in with their abilities now, as well as a young man of 17 that told me he was an Arcturian ambassador, and he'd come in to help with the ecosystem of this planet. He called himself an ecological engineer, and his role was going to be to help with the ecology of this planet and what have you.
How do children know all this stuff? You know what I mean? Like how someone this young know about these things? Like that's the most interesting aspect to this to me, is how do they know any of that? Like how do they even know what you know, the environment? How do they even know that anything is polluted? You know, I didn't know any of that stuff whenever I was 8 years old. You know?
Well, when I wrote The New Human, right, what I discovered was a lot of the children are coming in awake. They're connected to their past lives. They know why they've come. You know, I had an 8-year-old explain to me he communicates with animals, and his role on this planet is to educate humans to the consciousness of animals and how to treat them with respect. A lot of the kids can communicate with animals. A lot of them are telepathic, and plants, I might add. Some of them are communicating with plants and other mammals and whatever. And the thing is that what seems to be happening, there's an upgrade of consciousness over the generations. And this is what I'm seeing, and why I wrote the book, was because some of these children are, you know, they're talking about their previous lives and their abilities at 4, 5, 6 years old, 7 years old, talking about going interdimensionally. I remember one 7-year-old explaining that he can go to other planets as long as he knows their mathematical number. And he uses the runes as a portal. And he said, and of course, the mathematical number is frequency. So he says, as long as I know their frequency, I can go to that planet. His consciousness can go there. He does it with, you know, naturally. He doesn't need to be shown how to do it. So a lot of these kids they're educated on board craft, but they're also coming in with a lot of this knowing as well. And the interesting thing was that the 8-year-old that I spoke to was actually in my office. And he said to me that when he's on board craft with other children, including his school friend, 2 of his school friends, which he recognizes, there are other children that he said don't look actually quite human. I said, why do they look different? And he said, because their eyes are different. I know they're not human. And he said, we were taught to use our mind and energy to make things and do things. And we're taught very complex things. And I said to him, so what kind of complex things are you taught? And he said to me quite bluntly, they're too complex for you. So that was it. There's an 8-year-old explaining, I wouldn't understand, So these are the new ones coming in now, and they're everywhere. I mean, I'm getting parents write to me from all over the place, explaining their kids are telepathic, that their kids are different, they feel things, they sense things. I mean, this young lady that I've just recently spoken to says in music, she not only feels the music, but she knows about the person who's created it. So in other words, the frequency and what's behind them creating it. So it's the actual source. She's able to interpret the source of that and what's going on with the person.
I guess the question now just becomes is why now? Why all of a sudden are we getting these highly advanced psychic kids now? Why haven't they been upgrading us for hundreds and hundreds of years? Like, why has it gotten to this point where everything's about ready to freaking collapse and everything is so bad? Like, why wait to the very last minute? Or have they been trying? Right, because I actually remember being very psychic and intuitive as a kid and seeing beings and things in my room as a child. But eventually, through the indoctrination of being in society and everything, it just kind of it shut it down to a degree. And then, once I stopped talking about it, it just kind of stopped happening as well. So then, how do you? Sorry, there's way too many questions there. I'll go ahead and let.
Okay, look. I've asked myself many of these kinds of questions because I've wanted to understand. My understanding is that it's been a gradual process of evolution and gradual, and I mean, they've been visiting, they've been upgrading and what have you. I think the catalyst for a speeding up of their agenda, if you like, has been because we've reached a technological era now where we can literally destroy ourselves. And it's like they've said, oh my goodness, it's like having a 3-year-old with holding a gun and not knowing it can kill. And we're like the 3-year-old, that we've got this technology could destroy the planet. And there's like an accelerated program that's happening now because I believe they realize that we need help to shift consciousness and understanding and whatever. And what's interesting because of my work is seeing the intergenerational links, so that you've got someone who's having experiences. I thought I'd close that. The grandparents may have had experiences, or one or both, the mother and father, and then the children. And I have noticed that there is a more of an awareness with each generation. What's been interesting, and what I noticed at first, was why the new generations, many of them are considered dysfunctional because they're ADHD or Asperger's or some form of autism or dyslexia. And I'm sort of saying, hi guys, now why would you create what is being, by mainstream at least, considered as dysfunction? Many of them are, in metaphysical terms, are called indigos, crystals, children of light, rainbow children, all the rest of it. What came to me around all of that is they're wired differently, deliberately, to stop them being programmed and into the limited 3D reality. So the more that they are wired differently and harder, if you think about what happens to ADHD children, many of them, the only way they get them to concentrate and get programmed is if they dose them with Ritalin and slow them down. So what has been the program has been, let's wire them in a way that they can't be programmed. So you've got what is considered a dysfunction, And there was one lovely gentleman in Neil Gold in Hong Kong who wrote the book, The Close Encounters of the ADHD Kind, because he was ADHD and he was in his 50s. And he retranslated that into always dialed into higher dimensions, because he always saw a greater reality. So when I talk about these so-called conditions, what we've got is we've got the upgrades, and the upgrades are much harder to program, which is the whole idea, because as you said, you got shut down through the educational system or religion, or through, there's a lot of different ways we're shut down from our multidimensional awareness. And what's happening now, because of what's happening on the planet, and because it's really becoming obvious to many people that, how controlled we are on multiple levels, is that people are starting to wake up. And more of them are coming to me, starting to see spirits and feel energies, or see beings, or being aware of healing abilities and whatever, because that's what's now happening on the planet, this activation or awakening. And many of those that that are being activated through the downloads of people who are having experiences, such as the light language and or star language, it's called, which is a frequency, or downloading music from these beings. And I talk about the children that are downloading music with the frequencies. You've got those that are doing artwork that are activating perception. And I wrote about a young artist who said that he's come in from another dimension to create artwork that, when you look at it, actually activates more of our awareness. So it's coming through art, music, frequencies, star languages. There's a whole range, and people talking about it are activating people as well, because they've also got that frequency that once you hear stuff and it suddenly activates something in you. So in a way, that's now what the program is. It's full-on program to wake up humanity. And this is why so many are coming out with their experiences now. But the children are at the crux of the new awareness, because they've not yet been shut down. They've not yet been programmed out of that understanding and their connection to the beings, which they say may be family. And the 8-year-old explained that his family was the mantis beings. They were his ancestors. And when he dies, he's going back to being in the mantis. And he's quite comfortable with that as being his origin. And this is what I mean. A lot of the kids are relating to their star family, and may say, I come from the Pleiades or Andromeda or Arcturus or another dimension. As a 10-year-old explained, he came through a portal in the sun from another dimension. So this is the awareness that's coming in now, and it's everywhere. I mean, this is not unusual. This is families writing to me from all over the globe.
When you think of past lives, what if past lives aren't really past lives, right? What if they are more of parallel lives, right? Because I think you brought it up earlier that we are multi-dimensional beings, and when you look into certain concepts of space-time, you discover that, and that it turns out that everything is happening now, right? Including the past, present, and future events, and past and future lives, where it's actually all just happening right now, here in this in this very moment. And there may be some circumstances or situations in the astral state in which, in the dream world, where you can jump into these different parallel lives, which would also explain why some feel they're more part of a different species of beings, reptilian, mantids, like you were talking about, and so on. What do you think of that?
I think it's all very possible, because when I've taken someone into hypnosis, sometimes they'll see themselves in another parallel life, perhaps with a different family and different experience. So that's one thing. I remember in the Secret School book that Whitley Strieber wrote many years ago, he talked about being shown his past lives, but he said they were all operating now. It was almost all on the same frequency, if you like. And he said, I can access some of those. And what I've found is that when someone's had a phobia or a trauma from a past life, an imprint, you can go back to that and you can erase that imprint. So you can only do that if that in some way they are accessing it from what we call our now or whatever. So I'm pretty certain that, you know, the parallel lives, different timelines, are all part of what we don't yet fully understand is our reality. But they're all accessible, and the more aware you are, the more you're aware of maybe going to another parallel life. And there may be many parallel lives. I mean, we know there's many dimensions, and if we've got a similar scenario in every dimension, maybe we're accessing many of those in our dream state as well. When I asked my source, you know, to explain why this could be that they'd have another life somewhere else or whatever as a soul, I was sort of shown my hand as the you know, the oversoul, but aspects of me are all these aspects of me that can go to other experiences and other realities and other experiences, but we are only remembering this in this reality. And that was as much as I could, you know. I'm not a physicist, so, you know, I don't understand the depth of that, but I just believe that it's all part of, you know, consciousness is primary. Basically, it's all to do with consciousness.
I agree. Kind of random, but what about crop circles, right? You know, what's going on with crop circles, Mary? Are they really ETs trying to give us a message or encode something into crop circles?
I believe the majority are absolutely real. I've been in crop circles myself, and there were actually at one time there were about 150 different crop circles actually in Australia, because we did a crop circles and contact tour in 2006, I think it was, where we got Janet Ozabard, you know, the crop circle researcher, over from the Netherlands, and we found out many farmers don't even talk about it. I believe absolutely that they are created by some intelligences that are, if you like, bringing a certain frequency. My understanding is a lot of the crop circles are over water, and what they're doing is imprinting that frequency in the water, which of course gets then travel, you know, all over the planet and what have you, which
That's
is
really
interesting.
interesting. That's
Yeah,
really interesting. I'd never heard that before. That's incredible.
yeah. Freddie Silver talks about that. I mean, he's looked into a lot of that, but yeah, they're often over aquifers, so they're actually imprinting a frequency there, which is, you know, really, really interesting as well. So for me, they're absolutely most of them. There are some that have been created by other, and I've actually met someone who did do it for the government. So, you know, I do know that that's the case. But I have one interesting little adjunct to that was a young lady that told me that she had a dream or an awareness that she was one of the lights of intelligence that was creating a crop circle, that she actually described what it was like to create with her consciousness, where she was obviously out of body and was part of the intelligence that created one of the crop circles, and described the making of it. So you can take that or leave it as you want to, but there is so much more. There is so much more we don't know.
That's really incredible. And what about cattle mutilations? What's going on there? I'm kind of just touching bases on all the ET phenomena that's been attributed to ET intelligences here. But it's the cattle mutilations is a very, very interesting and a very little known thing that people tend to skip over when
Yeah,
when they're talking about cattle mutilations is human mutilations, right? That human mutilations has happened, and not as frequent as
yeah,
cattle mutilations, but it still happens. There's been people that's been found in their cars, drained of all of their blood and like basically all of their organs
right.
and all of that. It's and that's one that people don't really like talking about, because animals is one thing, right? It's fine if
Yeah.
you go do it to the cows, right? But whenever you're doing it to human beings, it's different. We'll just you know, shuffle that one under the rug.
Well, I don't know. I'm not as experienced on some of the research there, but my understanding is that the military have certainly done some of them because they've got the same technology. And I think that's you know, that part of the fear program, but also it's quite possible there are certain factions or certain groups that are doing that to the animals and to the humans as well. I don't know for sure about any of that. My research doesn't go into that kind of depth where I've met anyone that could give me any more information than is generally known. That some of them may, I mean, looking at the whole thing, some say, are these good or these bad or whatever. What I've discovered is that we are inclined to put certain groups of extraterrestrials in baskets because they don't look very pretty or other people have been scared of them. What I say to people is this: you can only go on an outcome that you've had for you and your experiences. And, what are you feeling from that being rather than what other people have told you you should be feeling, for example, because the reptilians have a pretty bad press generally. But I have met some wonderful souls that have met these beings and had amazing, beautiful experiences. One of them is a researcher called Barbara Lamb, who's pretty well known in the field, a really wonderful colleague of mine, talks about going in and seeing the 7-foot reptilian and being embraced by that and feeling nothing but love. So we've got beings within those species that plainly are not all the same. And the same goes with the different factions of grey. We hear that some of the greys are working with our military, for example. Is that all of the species? We don't know, because I was told by one lady that there were, at least she was aware of, about something like 600 and something odd species of grey. So we're inclined to put them all in one box or another, particularly if they look a bit scary or whatever and they don't look very pretty, where I'd say, well, they've got to be bad then, haven't they? Not necessarily. So what my way of working with someone is, what is it that you're feeling from this intelligence that you're interacting with? What's the feeling? And some of them will be, the being may look very unattractive to us, but just beam out a wonderful feeling of love and benevolence and caring and all the rest of it. So I think we just have to be very careful about making blanket judgments. There may very well be self-serving parts of those species, and I certainly think there probably is, but I don't know enough to say, well, these are this or these are this, because I don't know.
Were these Earth-based reptilians, or were they draconians, Theta Thori, white race? What kind of reptilians were they?
As far as I know, yeah, as far as I know, these were the Earth-based ones, as far as I know. But I've met hybrids that are part reptilian, part human. And there's a beautiful soul in England, Charmaine, just like Desario, she admits to being a reptilian human hybrid. She's a healer. She's the most beautiful soul, and says she really connects to her reptilian side. She's got reptilian children. Some are hybrids. She's met her reptilian son, and she actually says, but there's 2 reptilian children that were created by the military that she actually has met and doesn't like. She says they are really quite negative, and she says, and she's very worried about what they are, because they've been created by the military, and they've taken obviously her eggs and created these reptilian hybrids for their own purposes. I mean, we know about program life forms, and I'm sure you know about it. You're obviously very informed. The program life forms are the problem, because people will judge a species on the program life form that's a clone of a particular species that they've created. And they're in many of the underground bases, they emulate the whole scary scenario for abductions because they want people to be scared and to shut them up or whatever. There's been stories from some that have met them and said, that they don't behave. They're very cold. They're like robots almost, a lot of these program life forms. And there's greys and certainly reptilians that are program life forms. And I did a regression once with a lady who said she was on a table and there was a huge image of a mantis being, and she kept being told, this is evil, this is evil, this is evil. In other words, being programmed to believe all mantis were evil. So we've got all this mix that confuses. So what's the truth? And I can only go because I work with people on an altered level, where I'm helping them to access their superconscious aspect, so that we can get as much of the truth as possible, because what you're fed by, even by whistleblowers that might be very well meaning, may not be totally accurate, because they may in fact unknowingly bring in information that is not totally the truth, believing it is, because they're a whistleblower, and because they may actually be an instrument of those that want us to know something. So I'm always a little bit wary with whistleblowers, even though I commend their courage, but they may not be realizing they're an instrument of bringing in information that perhaps may not be totally accurate. So the only ones I really are more likely to trust are those that I work with, that I take into their superconscious self, and get what I call the integrity of the information from that level. That's what I'm more inclined to trust, more than anything else, because everything else is, well, I'm not really sure. Where's the source? How accurate is it? You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. There's so many people, unfortunately, like that in this community surrounding the secret space program, whistleblowers. And I have a theory on it that I don't think that any of their experiences actually happened here. I think that it happened in a different timeline, a different reality, and a parallel reality. I mean, when you look at it, the MK Ultra is always involved in these kinds of scenarios. So they break you, they traumatize you, they compartmentalize your brain, they create these altars, they open up a portal, and if they're able to throw one of those compartmentalized, fractalized parts of the consciousness that they just created through the portal consciously, then they would go out there and live out an entire life, and then they would come back, right? Because again, time I don't think exists, and who knows how space-time actually works. It could be 2 minutes here or 5 minutes here, and then 20 years out there in a different reality, and then they just come back and they think that they actually went in their physical body. But I don't. I'm more on the train that it's either a holographic kind of reality that they've gone through, or it's a completely separate alternate reality or parallel reality where these fantastical things are going on in these space wars and taking over Mars and all that stuff. I don't think that that's happening in this reality. Now, in a different one, parallel alternate one, possibility.
Well, I think it brings in the question is, what is reality? There's a part of me, because I'm a bit of a Star Trekky fan and have been for a lot of years, is, the holodeck, and thinking, maybe I'm on my personal holodeck, and Mary's creating an interesting life down here, as long as it's not boring. And maybe that's me creating what I want to experience and whatever as a soul, it could be all of that, and I can't dismiss anything, because I don't know what to dismiss.
Yeah.
So, for me, it's about being open to what I don't know. And this is part of the rabbit hole, isn't it? It just keeps going.
Oh yeah, I'm open to anything really. I mean, my thoughts, ideas, and beliefs are changing all the time. If they weren't changing, then I'm not doing any growing. I'm not expanding. If I still believe the same thing that I believed last year, then I've just wasted a
That's
year of my time.
exactly how I feel. Absolutely.
But there is some really wacky, stories, and whenever you think about it and when you look at it, you're like, okay, well, what is this doing? How is it helping at all? It's not like your work is, actually, helping people, just talking about, space battles and all this, fighting the draconian reptilians on Mars. It's not helping anybody. That's not doing anything for anyone. I don't really understand the accomplishment, really, behind talking about things like that. If anything, it's just bringing more and more fear into the equation. And we know that the government is, pushing this whole narrative of, fear. Everything is fear behind them. And even the UFO disclosure is nothing, but fear. So it's like, if you can't do anything to help in, other than any kind of, I just don't understand it really, I guess is my point. And I've had a few of them on my show. I've talked to a few of them, and there are a few that I think that are, really legit. Penny Bradley, I think, is really legit. Tony Rodriguez, I think, is really legit. But that's few and far between. That's two people out of the thousands of the SSP whistleblowers that are said that these crazy things has happened. But I don't know. I'm open to it, and I've done a lot of research into it, and I've listened to a lot of people, and I just it doesn't make any sense to me. The only things that we know for sure that are actually happening is the types of programs that they were in. Like MK Ultra, Montauk, Stargate. There's actual legitimate proof of those kinds of mind control and remote viewing
Yeah.
programs. Now, what happened after that, like, you don't really know because there's absolutely zero information about it. There's no documentation. There's nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm absolutely with you there. I'm a practical kind of person, and for me is what information is going to help me live my life and understand what's going on. And it has to be useful. A lot of, the stuff that's coming out, some of it is just, I'm just like you saying, well, what does that mean at the end of the day? Even if it's true, how is that going to impact on how I'm living on this reality, in this reality right now? How is it going to help me make sense of what is important in my life, and all the other things that are going on? So I don't see any value of all of that, particularly, other than if you like an academic kind of interest in that as a possibility. And I'm open to, and Tony, I know Tony, and I think he's absolutely spot on too. Because I don't know whether he's mentioned anything to do with the space arcs that are being activated. I don't know whether he's mentioned that to you or not.
I had him on, but I don't think that he mentioned it. But I had another guest on. His name is David Lotherington, that I think is a very legitimate person, and he was kind of talking a little bit about the space arcs and the activation of them. What information do you have about them?
Well, I can tell you this because he's told me he's remote viewed two areas. Prior to all the space arc information, the reason I took interest in it is I was working with a lady who'd had an experience with a whole some onboard craft where she recognized some of her friends, and that blew her away that she recognized them. And the next day, some of these friends rang her up and said they had a dream about being on a spacecraft. So that actually confirmed that it was real for her. What was interesting, though, that she wanted to know what else was going on, and it took her back to a time of Atlantis, where she had a lifetime there, and everything went topsy-turvy in Atlantis, as you probably know. It got destroyed, and they've incarnated now to help with what's going on now. And she mentioned something about something being around the Gulf of Mexico, and symbols. And she said it's something being activated, Mary, and it's with consciousness. I knew nothing about space arcs. I hadn't come across any of that. I just found out about that. As it is, Dr. Michael Sala was talking to a whistleblower about arcs being activated, two in Ukraine, and one and other places. And I'm getting interested now, thinking, well, I didn't even know about any of this. So what's going on here? To cut a long story short, Tony does remote viewing with a group, and they were talking about remote viewing this one in the Gulf of Mexico, and it seems to be some form of craft technology that's being activated. He's visited it remote viewing wise and saying there's something going on there. It's something is being activated by consciousness. And I got him to look at another one, which is in I'm just trying to think, Romania, the Sphinx, and they looked into that, and that's written about by Peter Moon, by the way. It's translated.
Yes, Romanian Sphinx, a very, very good book. Yeah.
Right. Well, they've looked at that as well, and it's a similar. He's seen way down huge craft there, and also beings in stasis. And he's saying that that's being activated, and part of if you want to take this on board, is that Putin's got an arc in Russia. He's and the two in Ukraine is the real one of the real reasons there's a war there at the moment is because of the space arcs there. There's two of them in Ukraine, and the US want them.
And what does the space arcs do? Are they because there's a bunch of different theories about what they are. And from my understanding is some of it's kind of like a Noah's Ark kind of craft where they have like the DNA of a lot of different beings and animals and everything on it. So if something goes wrong here and everything ends up imploding, the space arcs will activate and take the DNA and everything off of the planet. Am I sort of right?
It might be some of that, but what I'm hearing via my sources is that there's technology there that's going to be available for this planet once consciousness reached a certain level. And we are getting close to that. So they're being activated because we've reached a certain level of consciousness, and they're going to make themselves, they're going to show themselves. So that is, and there's also apparently these beings in stasis that are being activated as well. So if that happens, it may be something connected to what I've heard about, which is the event. And I've heard it from many, many sources that something major is going to happen on this planet. And that may be part of it. I don't know, because I hear all sorts of theories.
Like a global cataclysm event, or
not some, maybe, or maybe not. Maybe that these arcs will be activated enough to show themselves, and they will have the technology. The whole idea is that from the way that it's being portrayed is that once we reach this certain level of consciousness, we can then have available to us this new technology that will enable us to sort this planet out and what have you. But you need a certain level of consciousness on the planet itself. And there is no doubt that there are a lot of people waking up now, a lot of people that are wanting to change things on this planet and whatever. And maybe that's what they're waiting for this to be activated, and then maybe showing themselves. But that's, there's a bit more to it than that. But that's in essence all I can tell you at the moment. But Tony's part of a group that are looking into that, including this lady who I'm going to be talking about and her story, because she's seen the same things. She's seen also certain types of plants on these in these areas of technology. And it's like the craft is alive. That was Tony saying. It's like it's got a consciousness, Mary. And we've heard this before, that a lot of the craft are, if you like, conscious, and they interact with their pilots through consciousness. And he's saying this is what he's seeing. And the one that under the Sphinx, he was saying, is many miles down, and it's huge.
It almost sounds like a backup plan from the previous civilization that came, right? Like, we'll go through all these things. We'll try and help them the best that we can, but this will be like a last ditch effort, and it'll be activated, by them and by their consciousness. Because I think that's been the problem for a really long time, is that our technology has overruled our consciousness on the planet. And anytime any kind of technology overrules the spirituality and the consciousness of a civilization, the civilization collapses. And I think that was a big reason why Atlantis, of course, there's so many different theories of why Atlantis sank, but Atlantis and Lemuria was, from, what I know and the information that I've received, was destroyed because the technology got so advanced and out of control of the consciousness and the spirituality of the people that were on the planet. So it inevitably collapsed.
And that's what really my source, and again, it was only because of her regression and her wanting to find out more of what her connection was to all of this, that we discovered her link to Atlantis, where she was given a message, and also said, well, what we did and tried to achieve didn't happen. And so we've come back this time to make it happen. And that's when I came across it. She's saying, I'm being shown symbols on what looks like an arc or a space arc of some kind, she said. And that started my journey in finding, is there any more information on it? And gradually, I came across Sala's work with Peter Moon's work and whatever, thinking, well, that's really interesting, because for me, that gives it a lot of tangibility when it's come from someone who knew nothing about it, and then that started, and that's why I give that a bit of credibility. And like you, I trust Tony and his, I think he's pretty spot on with a lot of things in his group. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But the timeline is very within 6 months to a year max, he's saying, because these beings in there are being grown.
It's really interesting because whenever you're doing the regression with the lady, how she says that everyone that was there in Atlantis is here now, which I had received that same kind of information and the downloaded information that I created presentations on my show. I stated in there that everybody that has been on the planet since the beginning of time is here right now, and I 100% believe that. That's the information that I was given, that everyone that was here back then is also here now. And I don't really have anything, other than that, or what, is supposed to happen or what we're supposed to be doing. I mean, I know what I'm individually supposed to be doing, which is what I'm doing right now. But, I think that, that's really interesting that, that everybody it is for some kind of reason, right? Why would all of these awakened souls be on the planet right now just to see everything go down? It makes absolutely no sense. Why would there be so many star seeds? Why would there be all these different incarnations for everything just to go to shit? Excuse my language, but that's the truth. Like, why would everything be like the way that it is if we were supposed to lose? I don't believe that. I don't believe that we're supposed to lose.
Well, and I agree with you totally, because my argument is this: with all these new children and new generations of awake souls that have come to this planet now, there's no sense to them coming with all that awareness, all that understanding, and all those abilities just for a waste of time. Because I don't think they'd bother to incarnate if they knew that, and they would know that. They would know whether it was a waste of time or not. And my personal message with that is, if they said to me, Mary, you're going to go and work really hard down there and you're going to do your best to help people and whatever, but I'm really sorry, but at the end of it, it's not going to work out. You know what I'd be saying? I think you can get someone else to volunteer. I'm gonna pass on that one.
Yeah, I'm not going on that trip. I'm gonna abandon that mission. Not going for that one. Yeah,
doesn't appeal to me. No, I don't think so. And I really believe that. I believe that you wouldn't have all these amazing souls coming in that I'm meeting and connecting with all over the planet. These young avatar, amazing, avatars from all over the cosmos. There's no reason why they would bother to come to this planet if everything was just going to go downhill. So for me, I know it's hard now, and we knew we were going to get a difficult time for a while until things shift. But I absolutely believe it will, and that we've come here to be part of it.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to wrap it up, Mary. Thank you so much for coming on my show. I really appreciate your time this evening. Where can people find you online if they would like to purchase your books or plug your website, or anywhere that people can find your work?
Oh, I'm on Facebook, but I'm also on they go to my site, acern.com.au, or The Alien Lady, or there's lots of different ways they can contact me through either of those messages from Facebook, as I say, and what have you. So, it's easy enough to find me. And anyone who wants to get my book, they can get it directly from me if they're in Australia or New Zealand. But anywhere else, I'm afraid you're going to have to get it from one of the distributors, because it's just too expensive to send out. But other than that, yeah, there you go.
Awesome. Thank you so much. The links to all of Mary's information will be in the description of this video. I very much recommend going and checking out her work and reading her amazing books, and watching her documentaries that she has produced as well. For everyone else, thanks for watching and listening. Much love to everyone in the chat. Please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the channel out in the YouTube algorithm. Share, subscribe, hit the bell icon as well for notifications. The link to my channel on Rokfin is in the description. Sign up over there. Hit the follow button for all of my premium content. Also, you can catch this episode and any of my other episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and download them individually to your device for free on Spreaker.com. Again, thank you so much for coming on, Mary, for sharing your information and insights with me and my audience. Would love to have you back on in the future sometime.
You're welcome. Lovely to meet you, Ryder.
Thank you. And remember, we're not only in a spiritual war, but a war on humanity. Stay aware, stay alert, keep loving your heart for everyone, stay safe out there. And remember, if you can see through the illusion, you are the solution. See you guys next time.